This is a story that happened a couple of years ago when I was 20 years old. I had a friend named Liam who was celebrating his birthday at a nightclub downtown. It was pretty exciting as he was turning 20 himself, which was the legal drinking age from where I resided. I remember wisely taking an Uber as opposed to driving down there myself, just in case I wanted to get hammered. Turning legal age where I was from always gave a reason to go over the top with the drinking, so taking an Uber was completely justifiable. When I eventually got inside the club, I could recall dancing with multiple females while hammering down countless drinks. Again, it was my friend Liam's birthday, so we usually hosted these extravagant events by getting a booth along with bottle service. "Hey dude, are you having a good time?" "Yes, sir." "I bet you're checking out that blonde at the bar, huh?" "Come on, man. Why don't you mind your own beeswax, birthday boy? You like them thick, don't you?" "Oh, you know what else is sick?" "What?" "My vomit." I remember not feeling as intoxicated after puking in the bathroom stall, but that didn't stop me from throwing in the towel and calling it a night. I can recall heading out of the club and calling an Uber, as I knew my chances of picking up a female were slim to none considering I had regurgitated ramen breath. I ultimately purchased an Uber pool, which was when multiple riders heading in the same direction as you could also share a ride. I particularly didn't like sharing rides with strangers, but seeing as how cheap the Uber pool was in comparison to the regular Uber, I thought I'd give it a try. I wasn't exactly the wealthiest guy at the time, just an average college student who was broke and lived off eating noodle packs to help make ends meet. About 5 minutes later, my Uber finally arrived curbside near the club. As I approached the Uber, I nonchalantly hopped in the back of the vehicle as I could see the front passenger seat being occupied by another male. I remember seeing the male passed out drunk, as I assumed he had consumed a large amount of alcohol considering we were in the club district of the city. As the Uber driver began to drive towards our destinations, I kindly introduced myself by saying, "Hey there, long night ain't it?" "Yep, I'm kind of used to it." "What's wrong with him?" "He's just drunk as a skunk, just like the majority of you kids I pick up." "Yeah, well, you only live once, you know." The driver acknowledged my statement by nodding his head as he proceeded to carry on with the ride ahead. I remember briefly being in and out of consciousness as I knew the ride was going to take a little longer than usual due to the ride being an Uber pool. I kindly requested the Uber driver to play some music in his car by saying, "Excuse me, sir, do you have an AUX cord I can use to play my music?" "I thought you said you only live once." "No, yeah." "Well, enjoy your life while you're still here, kid." I confusingly respond, "What do you mean? Don't you just enjoy looking at nature?" I then looked outside and realized that he was taking us through a secluded rural area where it was nothing but crop fields and land. That's when my sobering reality set in as I realized he had completely driven off route from the requested destination. Sir, where are we going?" "Can I ask you a question?" Sure." "Why did you get inside my car?" "Because you're my Uber driver." "And why did you assume that I'm your Uber driver?" "Because you picked me up." That's when I checked the Uber app and noticed something so disturbing it still raises the hairs on the back of my neck just thinking about it. The profile picture of the driver was the same man passed out on the passenger seat. As I casually glanced at the passenger, I could see a trickle of blood dripping down from his mouth. That's when the driver looked at me through the rearview mirror and said, "I'm not an Uber driver, kid." "Then who the hell are you?" "You're gonna wish you never lived from the torture I'm gonna put you through." That's when I opened the door and immediately jumped out onto the side of the dirt road. As the man abruptly stopped the vehicle, I knew I had fractured my rib cage, but through sheer adrenaline, I had picked myself up and ran deep into the middle of a nearby cornfield. I remember running for about 5 minutes or so until I was a good couple of yards away from the vehicle. That's when I heard the man yelling from afar, saying, "Come back, kid. I'm not gonna hurt you, it was just a joke." I remained silent and crouched down the entire time as I dialed 911 on my cell phone. I remember whispering my location to the operator while simultaneously using the Google Map feature. What was 15 minutes felt like 15 hours as I saw several police units show up at the disclosed location. I ultimately ended up filing a police report and getting dropped off at my house by one of the officers. As far as the so-called Uber driver, he was unfortunately not found as the vehicle was located near a forest preserve about a mile away from where the cornfield was. The man in the passenger seat was, in fact, the real Uber driver. He was unfortunately pronounced dead at the scene. I still don't know what the man planned to do with me that night. All I can speculate is that the man was severely ill in the head and needs to get some sort of professional help. I now don't drink nor do I take any form of public transportation when I go out, as the fear of encountering that man still triggers me to this day. I'm a driver for Uber, and I'm a 26-year-old female. This happened when I was 25. It also happened to be on Halloween night. I usually start in the town next to mine, it's only 15 minutes away. On the way there, I get the notification that Tony needs a ride. His pickup area was odd but still within town limits. I didn't think twice and I accepted it. His pickup was at a well-known bank. I thought it was odd it was 11 p.m. and the bank's closed hours ago. I sent a notification to the customer letting him know I was there in the yellow car. I waited about 2 minutes, and he knocked on my window asking if I was Karen. I said yes and told him to hop in and buckle up, and he did. He was an older man, and he had some food with him as well as a backpack which he put at his feet. We headed out to his destination, and at first, he really seemed perfectly fine. He did ask me to pull over so he could call his friends and make sure that they were home just in case. Honestly, I really don't mind doing this kind of thing, as I know how to handle myself if anything went wrong. But I don't think I saw him call anyone, his phone wasn't dialing out. He just put it up to his ear and said no one answered. So, I got back on the road as I wasn't gonna wait around forever. At the next stoplight, he asked to see my hands. I figured he wanted to see if my nails were done or something. I said that I'm sorry, but I'd prefer not to, as I really don't like being touched. Not a minute goes by, and he asks another question. So, I was wondering, can I show you something? Now, I'm a nice girl and I don't see anything wrong with friendliness, so I then responded back with, "What? What is it?" As I looked over, I saw this man had exposed himself while also groping himself. At this point, I'm scared as I'm a girl and with a complete stranger. I then wanted to tell him to put himself away or I was going to call the cops. I didn't want to aggravate him though, in case he decided to attack me or worse. Luckily, there was a gas station just across the road from the stoplight. I pulled in and asked him to get the expletive out of my car, that if he didn't, I was gonna pepper spray him. He did get out of my car, but not without calling me a few select words. I did call the cops and give his description and the locations of the pickup and drop-off and which way he went. I'll never forget this night as it always serves as a learning lesson for safety for myself and others. I'm very happy to say that I now own a dash cam as well as a firearm for protection. To all the female rideshare drivers out there, always be safe and listen to your gut. It may save your sanity. In the year 2015, I frequently used the app Uber because I wasn't able to drive for 12 months due to some DUI charges. Just a stupid mistake overall. There's this nightclub bar in my town that I would sometimes go to on the weekends with my friends. Sometimes I would get a ride home with a designated driver if we had one, and sometimes we would catch an Uber. This night, I wasn't feeling too great, so I left a little early. It was somewhere between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning. It was way too cold to walk home, so I called for an Uber. A guy nearby named Jack popped up. I got to be honest, he was a little creepy looking. He was older, didn't really smile in his picture, and he had a grayish goatee with a black beanie cap on. He was only 2 miles away, so I didn't really care. It said he had a Chevy Malibu, which sounded nice, so I requested he come pick me up. I waited on the bench outside the club next to the bouncer, who stood still like a statue, hands folded together. About 5 minutes later, a silver 2003 or something Chevy Malibu pulled up in front of the club. I stood up, a bit disappointed it was such an old, ratty-looking car. The guy didn't call me over or honk or anything, he just waited by the curb. So I got up and entered the back seat of the car. Right away, things got uncomfortable. He didn't say hello, he didn't shake my hand, he didn't even turn his head to look at me. All he said, in a very quiet voice, was, "Where are you headed?" To which I replied with my address. We began moving down Main Street, but in the wrong direction of my house. I told him this, and he turned left at the next intersection. Now we were moving away from the main roads and down the quieter residential areas. He didn't put my address into his phone, so I felt really strange. I didn't know if he was expecting me to direct him or not. I ended up putting my address into my own phone so he could listen. When the GPS said, "Turn left down the next street," he completely missed it. I made a confused hand gesture. He noticed it and said, "I just got to make a quick stop. Don't worry, I'll give you a discount." Even though I was drunk, I still knew something bad was going on. That's when I noticed the handgun sticking out from his middle glove box next to him. By now, I was trying to figure out how to get out of this car. At the next red light, I tried the door handle very quietly, but it wouldn't open. I saw that the child lock was on, and from this point forward, my heart was racing. The man was driving farther out of the direction of my house. We must have been 2 towns over by now. I was getting desperate. I couldn't call the cops because I didn't know what this guy might do. I figured my best option would be attempting to flick the child lock switch next to him by the front seats. I had to somehow slide over to the opposite side of the back seat behind him without him noticing. This was one of the most tense moments of my life. I lost my sight on his head through the rearview mirror, making sure he wasn't looking. I very casually slid behind him. Thankfully, he didn't notice. Now came the scariest part. I had to reach for the button up front at the next red light before he could do anything. Each light we passed, I felt more and more tension build up as I was waiting for one of them to turn yellow. Eventually, one finally did. He slowed the car at an intersection that would usually be busy during daylight hours. It was a perfect escape point. The car came to a stop. I knew this light wasn't very long, so I had to be quick. A car was stopped at the opposite side of the intersection, which made me feel a little better. With all my courage, I reached my hand up to the lit-up child lock button. I must have startled him because he jumped 2 inches out from the seat. He screamed at me, and as I feared he would, he went for the gun right next to him. I was able to open the door and flee to the nearby Cadillac Escalade, where I banged on their windows asking for help. They drove off completely avoiding me, but it didn't matter because the man in his Chevy Malibu was already gone down the block. I ran into a nearby grocery store that was open 24 hours, where I called a taxi this time. This was a very sobering experience because I don't remember being drunk at all in that store or during the taxi ride home. I reported the driver to Uber, who said they would escalate the situation to the authorities. It wasn't until a whole week later that an officer finally showed up at my front door for some questioning. That was the end of that. I have no idea what became of that guy, but I've never used an Uber since. I'm a 18-year-old girl living in Baltimore, Maryland. For those who don't know, Baltimore hasn't always been the nicest of places to live, though I've mostly gotten along just fine. And luckily, I no longer live in the city, just right outside of it. You can still expect, though, that I was raised to be hyper-aware of my surroundings and very wary of strangers. At this time, my school would just let me out for spring break and we got the announcement for an extended break. At that time, I didn't drive, and neither my sister nor my parents could pick me up. With all my friends now living near me, I really had no choice but to Uber home. I wasn't new to Ubering to and from school. I've actually always had pretty good experiences with Uber up until this point. Either I get the usual quiet, relaxing kind, or I get some really friendly people with interesting conversations. On the day when my driver picked me up, at first it was perfectly fine. We made some polite conversation and we actually were getting along just fine. Now keep in mind there were only 2 more common routes to take me back to my home. Both routes only took about 15 minutes and all included very few main roads and mostly back roads. I also have a habit of looking at my Uber driver's phone whenever it's in that little phone holder. As soon as this guy started going off the suggested route, I became immediately more alert. I continued to converse with this guy, acting like I didn't notice a thing, still glancing at the GPS on his phone the entire time he was off route. Then he pulled onto the highway. Then I got quiet. It wasn't like the conversation just died down naturally. He just stopped answering me. I immediately became nervous. The guy wasn't taking me anywhere near my home. He was actually going down freeways that would have taken me into a whole different state. I immediately texted my friend group chat with what was happening, showing them the guy's profile and everything, texting them that if I don't respond within an hour to any of them to call the police. I was way too scared to press the safety button on my phone because I knew it wasn't uncommon for Uber drivers to purposely take super long routes to get more money. Still, I gathered up all my courage and I spoke up to him, letting him know that I was suspicious of him. "Excuse me, I'm sorry, but is this the right way? All the times I've Ubered, I've never been taken on the highway before," I said to him. Pretty much immediately, he started to reassure me that I was safe and he was taking a quicker route. Yeah, right. As I mentioned before, a normal trip home would have only taken about 15 minutes, maybe even less. I was in the car for nearly half an hour now. Then I tried to call my dad. He didn't answer. So what I did instead was give an Oscar award-winning fake phone call. "Hey Dad, yeah, I'm on the highway right now. Yeah, my location is shared with you." "Why?" "Okay, yep, I will. I'll talk to you when I get home. Bye, love you too." My Uber driver was staring at me for the duration of that entire fake phone call. I hoped if he thought my dad knew where I was and that he was expecting me to come home, he would hopefully not have any ill intentions with me. Right then, suddenly, my driver turned into a highway exit, and within another 20 minutes, I was on my main road home that I don't think I've ever gotten out of any cars so fast in my life. Still, though, my dumbass still gave him a decent rating and a tip. I guess because at the time, I truly didn't know if he had any ill intentions with me. I mean, it's very unlikely that he could have just been another Uber driver trying to make an extra buck. And that he did. I nearly got charged $20 more for what I usually pay for my ride I usually had to pay on that trip. I still wish that I'd emailed some kind of Uber customer service or something and explained the situation. Needless to say, please stay safe out there when Ubering, guys. If your driver ever goes off route for an extended period of time for no apparent reason, make it known that you're aware of it and that you're onto them. It could just very much possibly save your life. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to watch the latest videos.